Welcome. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Can you hear me? I've got you on two different screens. I want to see your smiling faces. All right, let's get started. Good evening, and I hope you have come to have a good time. My name is Kelly Adams. I am this year's GP Solo Diversity Director. On behalf of the entire Diversity Board, I'd like to welcome you to our second diversity series, Activate Diversity from the Rooney Rule to the C-suites in sports. I am thrilled that you are joining us tonight and would like for you to get comfortable, prepare to engage, and enjoy our series tonight. We have two incredible moderators amidst all of our amazing panelists. Our moderators tonight are Jamie Boston. He's a retired Army JAG. He is a 2015 Diversity Fellow. We were actually fellows together, and currently serves as the GP Solos Division I Administration Director. He is also this year's recipient of the 2020 Difference Makers Award for making a difference through service to the profession. Aaron Abrams is our current Diversity Fellow. He is the founder and managing partner of Abram Law. He focuses on areas of criminal law, OWI defense, and family law. At this point, I would like to extend a special thank you to our GP Solo Chair, Alfreda Coward. She has been very supportive and invested in our goals this year, and we are very grateful to have her as our chair. I'd like to acknowledge that she is the very first African-American female to chair this division. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank our sponsors this evening, Thomson Reuters. At this time, on behalf of Thomson Reuters, I would like for those of you who have a glass to raise it. Somebody raise it. If you don't, oh, there we go. I see them. Raise your glass. Now, let me just say this. I have sparkling cider, but it's okay. You can have whatever you want to have. And let's toast to a great evening. Enjoy and please engage. Thank you again and welcome.
Kelly, thanks for that great introduction. Welcome, everybody. And thank you for being here tonight. I know everybody has a busy schedule, but I promise you, we have a phenomenal program planned for you, some outstanding panelists, and I think you're going to learn a lot. And it doesn't matter whether you're a sports fan or not, old or young, a lawyer or not, I think there's something in this program for you. So please sit back, enjoy your beverage, and relax. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our panelists for the evening. They are, first, Mr. David Kelly, Chief Legal Officer of Business and Basketball for the Golden State Warriors. Second, we have Ms. Demeka Fields, Counsel of Global Sports Marketing and Data Privacy for New Balance. Third, Mr. Wes Unseld Jr., Lead Assistant Coach for the Denver Nuggets. Fourth, Ms. Traci Bransford, Partner at Stinson LLP. Next, Mr. Wayne Gomes, a retired Major League Baseball player, pitcher to be exact, and owner of the Virginia Baseball Academy. And last but not least, Mr. Brian Baptiste, Director of Athletics and Recreation at LaSalle University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We have an outstanding group. But before we get to them, I want to introduce one more person, and that is Mr. David Samuel. He's a second-year law student at Drexel Law School and also the co-president of the Drexel Law School Sports Entertainment Law Society. David, take it away.
Thank you, Jamie, for that great introduction. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's panel. Sports is synonymous with the American way of life. Sports shapes relationships and influences our everyday schedules, and even allows for people of different backgrounds to come together and agree on a particular topic. As sports has evolved, both men and women can see themselves represented on the field or on the court. But we are here tonight because those individuals making the key decisions don't look like many of us. Whether on the sidelines as a head coach or behind the scenes as a CEO, CFO, COO, or what is referred to as the C-suite, when it comes to these decision-making positions in major sports organizations, it is rare that minorities, both male and female, find themselves faced with the job to make a major decision. In 2003, the National Football League, along with one of its most prominent owners, took a step forward and changed the way candidates are considered for these decision-making positions. In 2003, Dan Rooney, owner and chairman of the Pittsburgh Steelers, while serving as the chairman of the NFL's Workplace Diversity Committee partnered with the National Football League and instituted the Rooney Rule. The Rooney Rule requires NFL organizations with head coaching, senior football operations, and major coordinator vacancies to interview at least one minority candidate to fill the open vacancy. In the first 3 years of its inaction, minority head coaching hires in the NFL increased from 6% to 22%. Coaches such as Mike Tomlin, Ron Rivera, Anthony Lynn, and front office members such as Andrew Berry, Chris Greer, and recently Jason Wright have reaped the benefits of this rule and are currently flourishing in their role with their respective organizations. With the institution of the Rooney Rule, owners of NFL organizations are required to go beyond their comfort zone when it comes to filling vacancies. The Rooney Rule forced NFL owners to seek out minority candidates who had similar or even greater expertise about the sport of football. Mr. Rooney realized the importance of diversity in the workplace and how the inclusion of individuals who know the game, regardless of their ethnicity or gender, would allow the NFL and its organizations to flourish well beyond expectations. But even with a deliberate call for diversity in place, professional sports is still faced with the disparity when it comes to minority representation in coaching and C-suite positions compared to minority player representation. It begs the question whether initiatives like the Rooney Rule are truly serving its intended purpose and providing more opportunities for minorities and not just serving as another procedural step in the hiring process. It also raises the concern whether this rule has provided more clarity in the hiring process of coaches and C-suite personnel. Tonight, you will hear from a great group of panelists who work across the spectrum of sports at the professional and collegiate levels. We will take a deeper dive into the impact the Rooney Rule has had on the National Football League. We will also discuss systemic discrimination and the disproportionate representation of minorities in key decision-making positions in Major League Baseball, the National Basketball Association, and collegiate athletics. The Rooney Rule has allowed for minorities to develop dreams beyond just the playing field. Will there be a time where any person can look at an organization and know exactly what they need to do to obtain one of these coveted positions? Thank you again, and enjoy tonight's discussion.
Thank you so much for that intro, David. I'm excited to get into this, so let's do it. So first and foremost, we have Mr. David Kelly up. Now, Mr. Kelly, it is my understanding that you are the product of an HBCU, the Morehouse College, just like myself. First of all, thank you for continuing to show that you can tell a Morehouse man, but you can't tell him much. So my question is, there's still a belief, though, that HBCUs don't adequately prepare our students for the world. How did your HBCU and the experience prepare you for the success in your career currently?
Well, great question. Always a pleasure to give props to Morehouse. First off, just really happy to be here. Going to Morehouse made me who I am. It prepared me academically, but far more importantly, it prepared me from a emotional, psychological standpoint. I was at a point in my life as a young man, I really needed to get into what my identity was and understand who I was and be proud of who I was. And that's what I got out of Morehouse. And I don't know that I get the same sort of sense of self going to another school that I got from going to Morehouse. And so I think that HBCUs of all stripes prepare their students extremely well to succeed inside of the workforce, both from an academic standpoint, but more importantly from, I would say, a psychological standpoint. When oftentimes you're walking in the rooms and you're the only one who looks like you inside of that room, it's good to have that strong sense of self when you're entering that room so that you can move and operate.
Okay, thank you for that. So as the chief legal officer for an NBA team, how were you able to activate diversity, and how would you advise your fellow, white, black, male, as well as female, as well as other counterparts to do the same in today's environment?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to make sure that you see it as a priority. I do see it as a priority, and I understand that diversity in the sports space is not only race, it's not only racial, it's gender, especially in sports. And so understanding that as well. And so trying to be intentional when I'm trying to create opportunities, whether it's internally, hiring inside of my legal department, making sure that I'm interviewing diverse candidates for roles. When I'm giving work out to, once you're the general counsel, you're in a position where you can actually give out work. And so that I'm seeking out diverse partners to manage the matters that we have at the Golden State Warriors. And then where the subject matter expert is not a diverse person, making sure that they have diversity on their teams. And so are there associates at a firm that I maybe have created a relationship with at an event here or a conference there, and that it would be someone that I would want to advocate for at a firm that maybe I'm already giving work to? Is there a way that I can drop that person's name into a partner's ear to say, do you have a relationship with X person? I met him or her at a conference. I really was impressed with them. I don't know if you know them, but it would be great if there are opportunities on our, on the matters that you're working on for us, that you would consider them. That, having been an associate at a large law firm, when the person who's paying the bills and holds the purse strings is referencing you in that way, that goes a long way. And so understanding the position that you have, we all have spheres of influence. We all have certain power in being intentional and willing to use it. In addition, in terms of hiring at the Golden State Warriors, our HR department has implemented a bit of a Rooney Rule for all positions that we hire at the Golden State Warriors. So in our Rooney Rule is essentially for any position that we're hiring, we need to bring in a diverse slate of candidates. And that's around race, it's around gender, it's across the board. But then I won't say more importantly, but equally important, we have a diverse slate of individuals who are on the hiring committee who are interviewing that candidate. So it's not just I'm coming in for an interview at the Golden State Warriors and I'm seeing all people who don't look like me. No, I'm meeting with Black men, white women across the board at the Warriors. And those are the people who are going to ultimately be making the decision in terms of hiring me or not hiring me. And so I think the other part of the Rooney Rule is making sure that you have a diverse slate of people in the hiring committee.
Okay, great answer. So continuing talking about hiring, and because you're working in the NBA, in 2014, Donald Sterling, the former owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, came under fire for some, we'll say seemingly racist statements, where one of his recorded grievances were that he had issues with his girlfriend at the time associating with Black people. How much influence does the owner of these organizations have when it comes to hiring? And also, what potential impact could this have on their applicability of the Rooney Rule in their organizations?
So it's interesting. So putting aside the fact that you have someone who is owning a team where 80% of the people who are the front line, who are the face of his franchise, African-American men, having issues with African-American men, putting that aside just for a moment. Obviously, owners have a great influence on the hiring of certain roles, but most roles that are hired, at least in my experience at the Warriors, the ownership is not involved in. So they obviously are going to be involved in the hiring of the head coach, hiring of the general manager, hiring of the president. But any of the roles that I want to hire, I don't have to bring that up to ownership. And so if we have a diverse slate or a diverse group at our executive team, we are empowered to make our own hiring decisions. And then the people who report to us are empowered to make their own hiring decisions as well. But there obviously is going to be a tone that's set at the ownership level. And I'm not sure, obviously the tone that was set at the Clippers was not the right tone. And it was important for Adam Silver to take the steps that he took in 2014. And I don't know if everyone remembers, but Adam Silver had just come in as the commissioner of the NBA a couple of months before. And he made at that point in time, unprecedented decision that after Sterling's comments, he was going to strip him of his franchise. That is not, this is a legal conference, so that is not that is a legally risky decision that he made. And to me, it underscores the importance of diversity, because it's very difficult to make that decision. It's easier to make that decision when you have a diverse owner who is Sterling's colleague and Michael Jordan, who's coming out with a statement condemning Sterling's comments. When you have Vivek Ranadive, who was an owner of the Kings, condemning the comments. And then you had all other owners similarly, but I think Jordan was the first, condemning those comments. And then you had the two teams that were involved inside of the playoffs at the time that those comments were made by Sterling were the Clippers and us and the Warriors. The coaches of those teams were Doc Rivers and Mark Jackson. So you had two black men in positions of power there. I remember at that point in time coming to the next game and actually feeling like, should I even be at this game? Should we be playing this game? I was 2 years into the job. Am I going to have to find a new job? Because if the NBA doesn't handle this in the right way, I really don't want to be involved or associated. So to have the black leadership that you had from River, and I know the players are feeling the same way. So that leadership that Doc Rivers was showing to his team and that Mark Jackson was showing to his team helped to keep the guys together so that Adam, a couple of days later, could make the decision that he was going to make. But I think it just shows that you have to have representation, you have to have diversity at all different levels, because it allowed Adam, or helped Adam, to make the decision that I know that he wanted to make already. But when you had people giving them that spine, I'm sure the lawyers are, if I was his lawyer, I would say, yeah, it's a legally risky thing to do. Maybe we come with a heavy fine. But when he made the decision that he made, I think it put the NBA on a completely different trajectory. And I think it's helped the NBA deal with what's happened as you saw with Kaepernick in the NFL. We didn't have similar situations inside of the NBA. As you saw the situations that happened this summer with respect to George Floyd and the way the NBA handled it. I think all of that trick goes back to what happened in 2014. And the NBA has benefited financially from that decision.
Okay. And the final question I have for you, we talked about it from the top down. Now let's talk about it from the cushy bottom up. And I say cushy because we're talking about the players now. And it's kind of hard to be at the bottom when you're making at least six figures. In regards to certain coaches being hired, what role, if any, do the players have in that hiring process?
Yeah, so players are always going to have a role in the hiring of the coach. I mean, the real decision makers are, the ownership, the investor group, and your GM are ultimately the people that make the decision. But there's no way that a decision, when someone reaches the level of a Steph Curry, we're not going to change Steve Kerr and bring in a new coach without consulting him. It's kind of like the hiring committee that we talked about a little bit earlier. That would be your highest ranking employee, and you may want to get his opinion on these things. So players will have a voice inside of those sorts of decisions as well, because that is who they're going to have to work with. That's their leadership group, so they need to weigh in on those decisions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kelly, for giving us those answers. I know you have to run because you're just that busy, and I feel it. At this point, we are going to, that concludes all my questions. For you, Mr. Kelly, is there any last minute things you would like to say?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to be here and just salute you for having this sort of discussion, because it's very important inside of the sports industry. Sports industry is obviously not the most important industry that we have inside of the country, but it is a very visible one. So we need to increase diversity in sports.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. Next, folks, we have Miss Demeka Fields. How you doing, Miss Fields?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing better now. Now that we've started, I feel a little more comfortable. So as far as I know, and you've told us you're also an HBCU alum. I gotta give a shout out to HBCUs.
Yes.
And HBCUs are receiving a lot of attention. From the female perspective, how did your HBCU experience prepare you for success in your current field?
Yeah, so I have to shout out Howard University, of course. because that is the HBCU. Morehouse is great, but Howard is the HBCU. And then I have to shout out Kamala Harris, of course, which is why Howard is more in the spotlight now. But I think, kind of like David said, my HBCU experience was amazing. I think it prepares you mentally to go out into, the real world. But one thing that I don't think people think about, especially if you haven't attended an HBCU or if you're not familiar with them, is how diverse Black people are, right? So you go to an HBCU and you think when you walk into the room, everyone looks like you, which is great, which is a great feeling. But then socioeconomic backgrounds are completely different, right? You have the people that are really well off and their parents are business owners, executives, and senators and in government, and you have the people who worked, right, to put themselves through school, kind of like I did. So even within the Black community, there's so much diversity, and going to a school where you can see everyone that looks like you, but then has a different background, and so you're still able to learn from them. I think that really helps you in life as well. And then once you get through, the hurdles of just being in college, being on your own, another thing I think is just, the alumni, your alumni base, like the Howard University alumni base, for me is amazing. And just seeing so many people, so many of our famous alum, right? Your entertainment alum, but then your Thurgood Marshalls and people like that, Zora Neale Hurston, who you're just like, wow, these are the people I can look up to. So all the things that David said, but to add on that, diversity of Black people was really, really big for me. And I still talk to Howard people every day who are helping me further my career.
Thank you for that. And how can HBCUs and professional sports partner to create a pipeline for students beyond simply being athletes to improve the accessibility between qualified, diverse students and these professional sports organizations getting into those front offices?
Yes, I think the biggest thing you mentioned was the word pipeline. And so that's what we were looking for when I was at the Vikings, was creating a pipeline with these schools so that we can bring talent in and it can be on a continuous basis. Because it takes a lot of money to recruit sometimes, right? And so you want to make sure you get a return. And so when you create these pipelines and these really long lasting relationships where maybe you can bring in an intern this year, but not the next year. But once you start talking to the students, maybe they don't start off as an intern, but you have a marketing position available for someone who's 2 years out, and you've built this relationship with the school where you can ask them for a recommendation and they can send you a list of candidates because you're looking for that diverse slate. So I really think it is building that pipeline. I will plug a group that we worked with at the Vikings and I hope to work with at New Balance, which is, now I'm blanking. His name is Gregory Gibson, and it's a 24-hour case competition for kids. It used to be at South by Southwest, but we will have it in the fall from now on. But it really is giving the students from, I think, 40 HBCUs this year, the chance to do this case and then to present in front of companies, including the NBA, including the NFL. The Vikings were there. We had some individual teams and then other companies like Dell, but really giving them the chance to learn and grow and then to present. And that helps us to see the talent that's out there rather than just seeing the resumes. We'll see those, but let's see how they present. Let's see how they act under pressure, because it's just 24 hours and they have to figure it out, right, and work in a team, and we're with them through the whole process. So those types of events are ways that you can really, really build a pipeline and not just pick and choose, but hopefully continue that long-lasting relationship.
Okay, outstanding. As a Black woman in a white male-dominated area, can you speak to your experiences and, simply put, is it enough for organizations to hire a woman, or does the diversification of the C-suite require a deeper dive into diversity?
Yes, so I want to go back. Battle of the Brains is the group I was talking about that the name slipped my mind, Battle of the Brains. But I think it really is important. I know David talked about diversity not just being race, But what I have seen on the football side and in the organizations I've been a part of is that there was a lot of attention paid to gender, right? Gender diversity, but not as much paid to racial diversity. And it seems like, to be quite frank, gender diversity would be the easy route, right? I want to say the cop out, but it would be the easy route. So if you look on the business side of a team, I don't know every team, but I know a lot of the NFL teams, you will see a number of women in these positions on the business side. And for us, it was white women, right? But when I left the Vikings, there were only 2 other Black women out of 250 people still there. But when you make that argument that we need diversity, it's like, well, we have, right? It may be 60-40 on the business side with women, so we're diverse, and we have 4 women EVPs. And you're like, yeah, but everyone looks the same, right? When I walk down the hallway, I may see other women, but I see no women of color. I see no Black women. And so I think we have to start, paying closer attention to gender and race and not use gender as a cop-out. Well, yes, we have women, but let's start talking about Indian women. Let's talk about Latino women. Let's talk about Black women.
Okay. So in 2009, the Rooney Rule was expanded to include general managers and front office staff, but still requires only 1 minority candidate to be interviewed. Should the required number of diverse applicants be higher? Why, or what changes would you make?
So to be realistic, I don't think it's about the number of candidates, because a lot of times when coaches or GMs or team owners go into these meetings, they kind of know who they want to hire. Almost like if you're in-house, the outside attorney you want to hire, or if you're an attorney, everyone knows an attorney, right? And so I think a lot of times these coaches already know who they want, GMs know who they want. So I think it has to be a deeper dive into the Rooney Rule. And a little bit when the Rooney Rule was created, it was so successful because it was like a personal plea. Mr. Rooney could make the personal plea to people. He was one of the most important owners at the time. So he could go and say, guys, we really need to have, and that's why we had a period where there were like 5 GMs and 8 Black coaches, right? And we're not even there now, and we're further in time. But he could make the personal plea, and people respected him so much. It was like, okay, we got you. So he did his part in making sure there was a pipeline. That's gone, right? Our most influential team owner now is Jerry Jones and maybe Arthur Blank. And I just don't think that is, I'm not gonna speak for them, but I don't think that is, right, their most important thing. Like, that's not what they're focusing on. And so I think we got to get past the number of people, get past the compensatory picks that now they want to give. And now we're like, oh, now you're giving picks to choose Black people to be coaches, right? You hate for it to have to go to that. I feel like we have to find a way, we could talk about this forever, but find a way where you see the importance and you see the talent. You get to know the talent of the person and see that they are talented and they belong, versus like, we're going to interview this Black person, but we know, or we're going to interview this Latinx person, but we know who we already want. So I think we got to dig a little bit deeper than finding a number.
Okay. And recently you've signed Kawhi Leonard, right? So looking at the relationship between athletes and the support of their sponsors in regard to social justice initiatives. Another example, of course, being Colin Kaepernick and Nike. What diversity initiatives have been implemented by New Balance as a result of pressure from athletes and the average consumer?
So I think there's a 2-prong approach that most businesses are going to take when they're in the sponsor role. And I don't know if it's always because of pressure. A lot of times pressure from your consumer does help, or pressure from your athlete. But I really think you have to look at it from an external perspective and internal perspective. Because you'll see like Nike has Colin Kaepernick and everyone's like, oh, they really supported him. But then you had the Instagram page, Nike While Black, right? And so they're saying, okay, you have Colin, but internally you're not supporting Black people. So I think it's a 2-prong approach where you want to make sure internally you're supporting your Black staff or your staff of color, and you're creating programs. And New Balance has initiated like diversity training, which I think we'll need to do a deeper dive, because just surface level training is not the answer, right? So there's the diversity training and the diversity committees and the employee resource groups where you start to support people with money, right? And let them know that they have a place to come together and the company is behind them. So those things I've started to see being here for 2 months at New Balance. But then I think externally, what I've seen is with our like Coco Gauff, who is a tennis player for those who don't know, and then Jaden Smith, who's one of our big influencers, it's working with them to see how they want their voice to be heard and how we can help them. So now we're going to have a Black History Month line, which last year was our first year having a shoe. Now we're having a whole line, and we're working with our athletes and our influencers to say, hey, do you want to be the face? We know this is important to you. How can we involve you in the company so you feel like you are happy to represent the company, and then we are supporting you because you want people to know, like Jaden has a food truck, you want people to know that you're really involved in this and this is something you really care about. So two-pronged approach, but I think a company has to look at both sides, because you don't want to look externally to the consumer and your internals messed up, but you don't want to have it internally and you're selling, right? And you're into making, you got to make money, and you want people to know externally you support your athletes and influencers as well.
Okay, thank you so very much, Attorney Fields. That was very informative. Those are all the questions that I have for you. And please stick around because we're going to have fun in the breakout rooms. Thank you at the end. Jamie, it's on you.
Thank you, my brother Aaron. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, Wes Unseld Jr. couldn't make it today because if you follow basketball, they surprisingly are starting the season within, 12 days from now. And when I first brought this to him, he was thinking he had, months to prepare. So apologize for not being here, but we're going to have a recording of my interview with him. But before we do that, I do want to take a short liberty to dedicate this interview to Wesley Unseld Sr., who was Wes's father and was a Hall of Fame basketball player. And I will tell you, he was an even better man than he was a basketball player and Hall of Famer. I also want to take this interview and dedicate it to Wes and I's best friend, brother, roommate, Jonathan England. He was a Caucasian, I want to focus on that, Caucasian professor of African-American studies at the University of Maryland, who also passed this year. And so he always had a dream of the three of us doing a program together. And so I want to dedicate and tribute this moment to him. And so with that said, I want to say, my best to the families of both Mr. Unseld and John, and our prayers are with you. We love you. And with that said, let's move on to the interview. Steve. The Rooney Rule, and I think by this point you probably got a definition of it, but what's your understanding of it in terms of what it's supposed to accomplish or what you thought it was supposed to accomplish?
Well, I think it, in its essence, is looked at as a, affirmative action program to, get minority candidates an opportunity to be interviewed for potential head coaching positions. I think in its, the impetus behind it was genuine. I think necessary, especially at the time it was came into fruition. The question, and I know we've talked to this about this at length, is, is it necessary for diversity in hiring now, and does it have a negative impact at times on certain candidates?
Okay. Well, what does diversity mean to you? Let's back up a minute. Let's go back to diversity. And so, I guess the first question is, do you think there's even a problem in particular sports and with the NBA? And I say that with understanding that the NBA has predominantly Black players, predominantly Black stars. Arguably, especially when you look at how things occurred in the bubble this past summer, they have a stronger voice probably than most major league or major sports athletes. So, is it even a problem in the NBA? I don't want to make that assumption. And if so, kind of elaborate on that.
Well, I mean, I'll say this to, kind of cover my bases. Everything that I say is strictly my opinion. Obviously, the lawyers understand why I would have to say that. But I think it's a systemic issue in society. You could say it's a microcosm, or the NBA is just a subset of that. But when you look at the sport itself, the percentage of athletes compared to the decision makers in the front office, compared to the ownership, it just doesn't seem to match up. Now, a lot of that there are other reasons, of course. But I will say the NBA, as far as major sports leagues, seems to be more progressive, forward-thinking, and diversified than any others.
Okay. And so let's talk about that. So again, it's unique for you because you literally just finished some interviews this past couple months. So talk to us so that the audience understands how does the interview process work, and then kind of tie that in with diversity, if there's even a connection.
Oh, I think every interview is unique. It's different. I wouldn't say it's much different than any interview anyone would have to go through. You have to obviously be ready and prepared. You have to be qualified for the position. But sometimes it's just a get to know you process. They've done their homework. They've done a lot of background, not only in your field, but also, from your college friends, from your former employers, coworkers, so on. So they've already done a lot of homework. I think by the time you get to that point, especially for a head coaching position, I think it's just to confirm what they already know, or to make sure this is a fit for their particular franchise.
Okay. And so, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you said that statistics support that obviously things are a little skewed. Not necessarily you had bad interactions or discriminated against, but there seems to be something that doesn't match up yet. So from your position, what could we do better? And I'll ask from the athletic side of it, and then let's go into kind of the civilian or the community side, if anything we can do to help improve those numbers so they're better closely correlated.
Well, I think it's, look at the players and you say, well, and I don't know the exact number, if it's 85, 90% of the players are, African-American males, then why are we so underrepresented, in front office positions? And I think a lot of it too is, do players, as they transition from a playing career, do they even look at a front office situation as a post-career opportunity? Is it even looked at as an option?
Let me interrupt real quick. Is that explained to you, to players or even young coaches or young scouts? Is there any program in the NBA now that you're aware of that kind of says, hey, look, you need to think about this when you're done with whatever role you have in the NBA right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, we always look at the franchise icons and the marquee players where money's not an issue, obviously. So they're going to live the rest of their lives happily and not worry about, earning a paycheck. There is another subset of players that, whether their career is short due to injury or, whether it's a talent issue, the average lifespan of an NBA player is a little over 4 years. Okay. So it's not, unless you're in that high echelon, that you can guarantee you can retire and just live the rest of your life without, having to worry about a job. So there are programs actually that the NBA Players Association, have begun to kind of push that agenda to broaden the spectrum for a lot of players and say, look, whether it's coaching, whether it's, scouting, these are opportunities that are out there, kind of see how you like it. They have, opportunities over the summer to shadow, assistant coaches, work clinics, do other things to kind of prepare and open that field to them, probably for the first time.
And so, I mean, is that enough, or what else, if you were kind of king for a day or even commissioner for a day, what advice, and maybe you get this opportunity. That's another question for you, actually. Do you as a coach get the opportunity to voice these type of things? You talk about the players. I don't know what it looks like in the, the higher echelon of the organization. You get to voice more ideas and anything that you would recommend, to your fellow coaches, to, your seniors, whatever, that could maybe, as we would say, activate diversity and improve the numbers in this area.
Well, I think especially now, we've seen it, the social justice issues that the NBA is kind of, backed, whether from the ownership down to coaches. I think the Coaches Association has done a terrific job pushing this agenda, bring it to the forefront. And we've seen it with the voting that's, during the election. And that's kind of been a thing the Coaches Association spearheaded, allowing the arenas and pushing for those arenas to be poll places and voting centers. I think just those little steps, and even that, there are a lot of holes and red tape you have to go through, but even that, I think, is something that kind of just opens the eyes of some of the decision makers, and they realize how important this thing is. But from a player standpoint, and I'll just make a blanket statement, and I don't know if I'm completely correct in that. I don't think many student athletes or professional athletes really think beyond their sport as far as what comes next.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just a problem along, professional sports in general. It's not and it's just an exposure issue. If you haven't been exposed to anything and you've just played, the bulk of your life, you've kind of honed in on this one area and all of your attention and energy has gone into this one thing. What happens when that one thing ends? So it's not just, I think an NBA issue. I think it's just an issue that we've seen throughout professional sports.
Are there any mentoring programs? I mean, could I think about it? And I bring that up because within the military, I'm a retired JAG. That's a big thing they're talking about right now to try to help improve diversity, where, different officers, whether they're white or black, are trying to mentor people of color, women, et cetera, so that maybe they get that exposure. Is there anything like that in the NBA? I mean, you talked about the program before, but how deep does that go? I guess, does that happen? Or is it kind of?
Oh, no, it definitely happens. And I think, I think once players identify that, there's interest, I think they're really fast tracked, which I think is great. You see former players who, kind of move into the front office role, and then within, 5 to 7 years, they're right on the cusp of being, assistant GM, maybe president. There's certainly not enough of them, but the ones that I've seen, they've been fast tracked because I think their experience as players gives them a different perspective. It's more fine tuned than someone who's never really been in the trenches and played the game.
And it's funny you bring up players. There was a controversy earlier on in summer about certain hirings. And one of the controversies was that, they hired a former ball player who was a Hall of Famer, superstar himself, but they were looking at, again, the numbers. Like, wait a minute, there's plenty of black coaches like yourself who are capable, willing, ready, and able, as well as women. I don't want to leave women out of this, who are able to step into these positions. And, they hired this particular individual. And a lot of people were saying, it's not about that individual. And I think that's actually the truth. I think that person is probably more than qualified. But how does that play in, to go back to kind of that fit question? Because a lot of people wrestle with, well, you could always argue they're not the right fit. And some that could be code word for it because they're a man or they're a woman or they're, not this or not that. So to go beyond that, what could we do, if anything, again, from the outside or even internally within the league to make sure fit is not used as a code word or an excuse for not hiring women, people of color, whatever it may be, into some of these positions? Is there anything that you can think of? And maybe, Kim, I'm kind of putting you on the spot, so sorry about that.
Right.
But is there anything you could see, whether it's a matter of maybe you have a checklist of criteria that aren't, they're not necessarily race-based or female-based or whatever, but just says you need to have these criteria to even be considered for a job? Would something like that help, or some other type of, program?
Well, it's tough to say, well, there has to be certain criteria. I think as a former player, you're going to check most of those boxes, and especially, a player of that caliber, in that particular instance. But it's just difficult because I think, once again, it's relationship based. And there are situations where you may feel even overqualified, not necessarily for a head coaching job, but for another position in an organization. But because of a previous working relationship, or, you went to school with somebody. So I think it's no different than any other industry in this business. You could say, well, nepotism. Well, I'm a benefactor of nepotism. My father worked in the NBA. The team that he worked for gave him the leverage to hire me as an intern. And thankfully, because of him, my work ethic gave me the opportunity to stay in the business. But my end was certainly relationship based. So,
but you staying there was based on your hard work. I mean, that's
agreed. And I think that's what in the NBA, I'll just preface that. I think that's more aligned to the things we've seen. I think that we've seen ebbs and flows with the number of minority candidates getting head jobs. And I think right now there's 7 or 8. I think 6 of which are African American. So out of 30 teams, it's not great, but I think it's certainly surpasses some of the other professional sports leagues as far as percentages. But it's one of those things where I don't know if you can ever really define the word fit, because I think it means different things to different people. For one franchise, and I'll just talk about my situation. They could argue, well, why would we take a chance on a guy who has no experience? Well, there's no I have no retort for that. I don't have any head coaching experience. I have 23 years of experience in this business. I think I'm more than qualified and ready, but someone's going to have to be willing to take a chance. And I don't think that has anything to do with race. It's just if you're, whether ownership or front office management, and you're making a decision on the future of your franchise, it's easy and safe to say, well, I want to go with a proven commodity versus take a chance on a young guy who we have no idea how this will work in this environment.
And I think that's right in a lot of ways. But again, that goes back to, and maybe that experience, does a player kind of outshine or account for that experience? Because there are players who have been hired into leadership positions who weren't coaches of any level or scouts of any level. So is there a balance there that, okay, well, you've played, particularly if you were a great player, that kind of is a substitute for somebody who's been in the league for 23 years? And again, I don't know, that's a question you can really answer, but that is something I think that a lot of people are looking at. Like, we hear that, but we also are seeing, well, wait a minute, seem to be, I think exceptions is too strong of a word, but there seems to be something that allows others to go through and others that can't. I
think you have to look, once again, you have to look at the broader spectrum. And once there's so many layers to that relationship, whether it's a relationship to the GM, where in some cases they may have been teammates.
Right.
So it's so many different dynamics that go into play. It's hard to say, hey, this one key indicator is the reason why or why not someone gets an opportunity and someone doesn't.
What can we do as lawyers or as average citizens do to help affect change in this area? Now, I would submit to you, maybe we do things like look at our congressional leaders. All right, we just came through this whole election process. You talked about the voting issues, the stadiums being used. Is it as simple as we reaching out to our local councilmen, governors, states people, whatever it may be, and say, hey, look, this is an issue that we need to get involved in as a citizen. If you have a stadium in the state of Maryland, then we should have some say in terms of who's representing the community in terms of leadership. Is it as simple as that? Is it, protesting is a big thing right now? Is it protesting maybe? Is there anything else, or is it maybe a combination of those things? What do you see, if you have an opinion on that, what we can do as just the average person? Maybe don't buy tickets or buy more tickets for certain organizations because they seem to be progressive and diversified. How do you see that from your standpoint?
Well, I think the conversation has to be had, and I don't think it's, you go from consumers to a 180-degree shift and all of a sudden protest. But I think there's a spectrum there where you can have conversations with local leaders and, franchise ownership, just to kind of gauge, where are we on some of these issues? See how they react to the social justice issues that are, on full display right now in this country. What is their response to that? So I think you can kind of look at certain things, dig a little deeper in their own background and see, how do they react to these situations? And I think it's telling. And you can't necessarily hold their feet to the fire because they're also business people. And we all know, money drives this whole thing. So, yes, you can affect the bottom line by not, coming to events or not, using the facilities in some way or some form. But I think you have to kind of do a little homework first before you just say, you know what, this is our stance, take it or leave it, as consumers.
Thank you for that. So Traci, let's talk to you for a minute. Now, we've heard from a coach, we've heard from a legal officer in the NBA. Let's talk a little bit about the other positions, the people that represent some of these players and some of these maybe front office people. First question I have for you is that minority-owned sports agencies, for example, the owners of Sports Entertainment Group, TLS, a talent agency, Clutch Sports, which is owned by or connected with, I should say, LeBron James and Rich Paul, and Rock Nation, which is owned by Jay-Z, are becoming more popular and relevant in professional sports today. In your experience, how has more diverse representation helped players during their playing years and when they retire? And then has this diversity allowed players to take more leadership, have more control in their respective sports organizations?
Well, thank you. First of all, Jamie, thank you so much for that question. But I'd like to first thank this division of the ABA the solo and small firm and general practice division, and its chairwoman, Coward. So thank you so much for having us here today. With regards to your question, it makes all the difference in the world. First of all, some of our leading Black-owned agents are the biggest proponents of athletes from historically Black colleges. Now, you mentioned that earlier on, and I must give a shout out to Spelman College, which is my alma mater. And so with all my Morehouse brothers and my Howard sisters, we're all here together. And so many of our Black agencies pick from historically Black colleges, unlike many of our agents that have 3 letters, I won't name names, that typically go to universities that are well-known, that our top draft picks come from, but they oftentimes leave behind historically Black colleges. So I'll start there. It broadens the pool and it benefits meaning our collective sons and daughters coming from historically Black colleges, based on the given sport. Secondarily, those agencies, the Black agencies or minority-owned agencies, also have a very vested interest in helping the players, not like the others don't, but because they've been there. They've started their own agencies. So they want to, in turn, pass on the same knowledge. And what I've seen is that it's been a direct correlation. Hey, I, for lack of a better phrase, learned how to get my hustle on, i.e. I've got my own agency. So I'm going to now help you, the athlete, have an alternative stream of income so that playing on the gridiron, on the basketball court, boxing in the ring, or playing on ice is not your only stream of income. And we want you to think about it now as you sit in the chair as a very top tiered athlete and also on your arc. Because when I think of a player's trajectory in their career, I do a kind of a half moon. I say they're on their way up and then they're here and they're peaking. And when they're peaking, they're often not thinking about the fact that an arc is going to also have a downturn. So that's the retirement piece. And I have found that many of my clients have a little bit of short-sightedness until they have someone pulling out their coattail and saying, hey, what are you going to do in the next 10 years? 10 years, I'm good. Well, okay, but let's think about this. And so they start giving them alternate avenues to pursue income. Accelerator programs, esports. I mean, you can pick one. Right now, influencers, we don't want you to be wed to the NFL, the NBA. You're given teams as your only method to bring in income, because as we know, many a career has been short-sighted based on potential injury, career-ending injuries, and many others in between. So I find that Black agencies and others, minority agencies, have been extremely beneficial to the players and will continue to help feed our pipeline of our players from historically Black colleges and other colleges and universities that may not be feeder institutions instinctively.
What about, let's contemplate this. Now, the Rooney Rule, since it's been instituted, only one organization has been fined for violating it, all right? How can this rule incorporate more stringent aspects or requirements, whether it's in regarding to recruiting, interviewing, filing grievances for those candidates that are slighted?
Well, seeing that I am representing players typically and not, well, I'm going to come from 2 perspectives. From the player's perspective, it would be very helpful to have the tone at the top, speaking down and saying, hey, I need to see more people that are in the front office so that they can help me, so that they can understand my life, so that I don't just come to the team, although I'm very happy to have a job and to be playing in professional sports is a blessing. They also want to know that they've got someone that's got their ear. So the players need to have more front office, C-suite members of color, as well as the organization. So then that's from the top down. So we need our owners to believe that if I don't have the numbers, then I'm doing something wrong, because then my players and my intermediary executives don't have anyone that looks like them. And then there'll be a breakdown in communication, a breakdown in morale, and it's a trickle down. You know, they're no longer, this is not a world of indentured servants. Just because we're playing for for a major sports league team or organization. Everyone wants to feel like they matter and that their voices are heard. And so I believe that as far as the Rooney Rule goes, like Demeka spoke earlier, it's not about the number. Yeah, we have one person that has to be interviewed. Great, because the person inside typically knows who they want to hire, as David referenced, and I believe Wes even just made that mention. So I do believe that it's a top-down remedy.
Let's be blunt and honest for a minute. All right. So we've talked about owners, and to me, it's kind of the elephant in the room a little bit. So we're talking about diversity. We're talking about hiring more women, more people of color, more whatever you want to put behind that. Will it really make a difference in terms of diversity, you know, in the C-suite if we don't change the ownership or maybe some other things? And if not, then how do we do it? How do we go about that?
You said we're going to speak frankly, right? Okay,
Yeah,
so
let's do it. Let's do it.
Right, and blank walks. Just bottom line. So I don't know how many owners we've got in the house, but Demeka mentioned Arthur Blank. She mentioned Jerry Jones, and we could, you know, the Wilfs here in Minnesota, and many of them are very well-intentioned and good people. In fact, I went to law school with one of the Wilfs. That's another story. My point is that the owners have to care about it. And so I don't know, unless we've got the financial wherewithal, unless we are going to actually start owning. So I think we've got a better chance, frankly, if we want to go there, with the NBA. I think we're closer to ownership with the NBA. I think we've seen some owners in the NBA. If we want to talk about things that happened in Charlotte back in the day. So money is going to be something that will help rule the direction that we go in as far as really pushing this initiative. Again, does it matter? Of course it matters. No one wants to be the only one in the room. This is 2020. And so the power that we have with our numbers, as we saw this year with the Black Lives Matter movement and what took place with the NBA, was just one example of power in numbers. And so we don't have the owners right now, but we do have the numbers. And so I think that we need to continue to push and push gently, but push and apply the pressure, because we do see that we will get results.
I have one more question for you. Actually, I have a bunch more, but we're going to stick with one for now because of timing. What recommendations, I hope we have some young lawyers, young professionals watching this tonight. What recommendations do you have for young lawyers or new lawyers in terms of diversity who want to enter this field? What advice would you give to them?
To seek mentors, to seek sponsors, to be intentional about, when I say mentorship, that's one. I see sponsorship, I see another. Sponsorship means someone that will speak on your behalf when you're not in the room. Mentorship will help open doors for you, and someone that you can emulate. Find those people. We've got enough of them. Some of us are on the call right now. Hit us up, reach out as well. Be excellent in your craft. Certainly no one's going to do you any favors if you haven't handled the baseline qualifications. You know, the floor is excellence. And so knowing that and crossing all of your T's and dotting all of your I's so that we don't have to circle back and make excuses for anyone. We've already crossed every hurdle that's needed. Now give me my shot, because I'm already supposed to be here. So my recommendation is to always know that excellence is the criteria, and also find those, because there are plenty of us to support each other. Find your local organizations, your local bar associations for young lawyers. Become members of the National Bar Association, NBA, divisions that might be more specific to your interests. MCCA, BSLA, I could go on, but find those that will help bring you up, and then make sure that when you're there, you drop your hand down to help the next person.
Traci, thank you. To you young lawyers, if you heard it right, you heard an invite there, all right? So take advantage of this opportunity. To the panel members as well as others, so we can improve that pipeline. At this time, I'd like to move on. Thank you, Traci. Move on to Mr. Gomes.
Hello, how are you?
How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, doing great.
Good. So let's hit a few questions, and then you and I've had a little discussion before, so we might get a little deep later on for the group. But let's start kind of soft in the beginning. When you played in a major league, did you see any minorities, making decisions? Were they managers? Were they in the front office, or any senior position?
Great question. And we spoke earlier. When I was playing, I was in my early 20s, and I was completely had laser focus on making it to the big leagues, staying in the big leagues, and being great in the big leagues. And anything else around me, I was kind of oblivious to. So taking a step back, and after you ask the question, I would have to say no. Okay, but at the time, coaches, front office people had no. I never felt like they had no impact on me. It was like I'm going to be in control of my own destiny. So, which can be true, and it can be not so true. But I didn't look at it at the time. I look at it now, being more mature and taking a step back, and being more of a fan. But at the time, I didn't pay attention. But there was none, or very limited.
We talked previously. You kind of told a story about a relationship that you have, and I don't want to put any names out there or anything like that. But could you tell us about that story? I think it's important.
Yeah. Well, our minor league coordinator was an older white male, and he had a son who was drafted by the team I was on, was the Phillies, and we were in Double-A together, and we became really good friends. We were really cool. It just so happened that his father was the big boss. Now, minor league coordinator in our major league team is a pretty big deal. That's a pretty heavy job. So as we became friends, he had a sister that would come in from time to time, and his sister was our age, and she was fairly attractive. So we would rib him of all time, about having a pretty sister, so forth. Just friendly ribbing, nothing personal or nothing. Just giving a hard time. Well, we played together a couple of years, and his sister got married, and his sister married a black man from, I think he might have played for the Cardinals, but she married a black man. So I felt comfortable enough to joke him about it, and and just, hey man, what's Dad think about that? And he kind of told me, hey, I just looked straight up, man. My dad's not very fond of black people, and he's not. He's kind of a racist, And I love my father, but he's kind of a racist. Let's just call it what it is. Now that's not something he spread with the whole organization, obviously. He shared with me because we remain, we developed some kind of type of bond. However, I didn't think much of it then because I never thought his father had too much of an impact on my career anyway, because I was going to make it or I'm not going to make it. And he wasn't going to be, the reason why I did or didn't make it. However, looking back, that's a problem. That's a problem because he had a lot of say over fringe players who could make it or who couldn't make it, whether they get the chance to come back. And you have somebody in that role who isn't familiar with people or doesn't care for people who don't look like him. I mean, just call it what it is. Yeah, that's the nuts of the story.
Let's take it a little further. So you were a successful ball player. You were in that higher echelon of ball players. Towards the end of your career, after all your accolades, all the experience you had, what programs were offered to you, or what advice were you given to assist you in your transition to go into that front office? Did you get anything as a superstar player?
Absolutely zero. But I don't want to put that on any team or organization. Here's the reason why. When you're playing, you are looking to take it to the next level. And at any point when you let your mind off the hook and say, hey man, let's start planning for front office or planning for life after baseball, to me, it would seem like I'm just a little bit letting my guard down and looking for something else when I could be putting all my focus into playing. So that's the mindset. That's the mindset of players. Look, I'm not thinking about, my next career. I focused these last 20 years on this career. And when it's gone, it's gone. And it's a shock. It is a shock going from being on the field and playing, and all of a sudden they say, "Hey, come here, you're not good enough. You have to go home now. We don't have a job for you anymore." So that's very difficult. And I've had a lot of friends who struggled really bad making a transition. They made a lot of money, and you go from making $1 million or $5 million to zero. I mean, your agent isn't holding your hand anymore because you're pretty much no more good to him because he's not making that commission. So, I don't want to focus. I don't want to put that responsibility on the teams. Now, it would be a good idea to present that to the players because some people might take it on. I'll be honest. I probably wouldn't have. Because again, my whole focus was getting to the major leagues, staying in the major leagues, being great in the major leagues, and staying here as long as I can. I never envisioned it not being there. But however, I was 25, 27 years old. You don't have the foresight, at that age as I do now at 47.
So is it fair to say that the Wayne Gomes, the pitcher, back in the day versus the Wayne Gomes now, you were afraid or chose not to upset the apple cart, so to speak? Is that a fair statement, or is it just because you were so focused?
I would say I didn't like to upset the apple cart, but I don't understand how that. Help me out now. You said upset the.
So let's go back, and then maybe I skipped a step here.
All right.
Let's talk about today's time. Let's go back. I'll come back to that question in a minute.
Okay.
All right. Black Lives Matter.
All right.
All right. And player activism as we've seen it today.
Correct.
Particularly when you look at Colin Kaepernick and kneeling. All right.
Correct.
If you were playing today, would you stand or would you kneel?
Okay, good question. And I thought about this a lot, and I know my answer is not going to be popular, but I'm going to stick by it. And my answer is I would stand. I would stand. It's not because I don't believe Black Lives Matter. It's not because I don't believe in what Colin Cap stand for, because I do. I completely do. I also understand that flag to me doesn't necessarily represent the military, but it also doesn't necessarily represent police brutality either. It represents a lot of things, many of things. And my choice will be to stand. And here's another reason why. I have played and I've been in a lot of other places. I played baseball in Venezuela. I played baseball in Puerto Rico. I played baseball in Dominican. And what we have in this country is a pretty good thing, and I'm proud to be from this country. So we have our problems, most certainly we do, but we have a good thing going, and this is where I'm from, and I would choose to stand. It might not be unpopular, but that would not be in a reflection of what the next man decides to do, because he might have his own certain reasons, and he has his own sorts of beliefs. And that's one thing that makes this country so great, that we can agree to disagree, and you can express your own opinion.
So just so I'm clear, and full disclosure, I'm a retired Army JAG. I'm a combat veteran. And so for me, yes, I'm always going to stand, but that's because I'm a third generation combat soldier. The flag is something that's always been in me, and I'm just going to do it. However, I truly believe that I fought wars so that people had a decision. And so just so I'm clear, if your teammates were to kneel, would you have any issues with that?
No, I would have no issue at all. No, I thought I tried to make that clear. I would have no issue at all. No, none at all.
Okay.
No.
So let's go on then. What about those who would say that, look, you're a big time baseball player, all right? You have responsibilities, particularly as a player of color, to speak up, to speak power to truth, all right? Those who would criticize your last comment, what would you say to him? Is it as simple, is it that simple that if you're a big time player or maybe an average player, you should speak up when you see something wrong?
Well, first of all, kneeling does not mean I'm not speaking up.
Okay, fair.
So let's just. I have made a pact with myself that I'm going to speak up and speak out.
Okay.
And offer everybody an opportunity that I can give an opportunity to. And next, I never considered, and I appreciate, I'm humbled by how you describe my career, but I never considered myself a big time player. So and that matters. I know we'll get to that later. We had the conversation earlier. We talk about the Dallas Cowboys, and Jerry Jones said, all my players are going to stand. Well, okay, you think so, but if Dak Prescott decides to kneel, the Cowboys, he's going to kneel and he's going to start and he's going to play, and Jerry Jones is going to have to be upset. That's just how it is. He's not going to be benched, and he's going to have a career. He has guaranteed money, and nothing's going to happen to him. On the flip side, if the backup long snapper decides to kneel when the rest of the team stands, that backup long snapper is going to be out of a job. That's just facts. So there are different levels to this. And I don't knock either one, because that backup long snapper has a family and children to feed. And if he doesn't feel like this is the platform that works for him, then I don't think he should be ostracized. I don't. That's an individual decision.
Okay. And I'm going to switch gears a little bit, because our diversity discussion has primarily been about race and gender. You also share with us a personal story about your son when we had our pre-meeting, and I want to talk about, not everybody's going to be, and I do consider you to be a superstar. I think you did pretty well for your time in the league.
Thank you.
Not everybody's going to be that person. So what's there for them? And tell the audience about your son a little bit, if you don't mind.
In particular, what his how he was born, or
yeah, well, just the fact that he had a disability.
Yeah. My son was born right in the middle of the season. He was born with childhood glaucoma. He was born blind. He had while he was in Philadelphia, he had about 5 or 6 surgeries. In the last surgery, they told us the exact words were, with a cornea transplant, he may be one day able to see big letters. But on the way out the door, he gave me a card for a guy named Dr. Walton in Boston. So we went to Dr. Walton in Boston. I called Dr. Walton. He returned my phone call the day after the Labor Day. And I told him the condition he had, what his pressures were looking like. And he said, get him up here. We raced him up there. And Dr. Walton saw my son and says, hey, look, I can help you. However, he can never, ever see another doctor ever again. He had to be under my care. So the Phillies gave me some time off. Miles immediately went into surgery. He didn't get cornea transplant. He had some tubes put in his eyes. He is doing great now. He sees, he drives, he lives the function of a normal boy. He sucks as a baseball player, but he's a great kid. Like I said, he's at Hampton. He's a junior. He's flourishing, and he's lived a normal life. There's some opportunities I wanted to offer him, or I told him, he's a baseball fan. He watched me play, as a child. He would never. I saw from a long time. He would never ever be able to be a baseball player. So I gave him some option. I said, hey man, you like baseball? I would try scouting. I think there's a market for if you learned a foreign language, specifically Chinese. Or if you could be like an international scout. He didn't do it, but I thought that would be a good avenue for him. I did introduce it to him. So,
and the purpose of that story is really, I want to talk about the options real quickly. The options that maybe the stars don't have that you can maybe introduce. You teach a baseball academy. What would you say to those persons out there that want to get into the front office, but maybe they want to be the superstar, but they really just can't be? What can they do? What do you teach your kids in your academy, or what would you like to teach them?
Well, first of all, I give them, I paint the whole picture for them. That the chances of you making it to the big leagues, and I hate to hurt your feelings, man. Okay, I know you're good at 13 or 14, but the chances of making the big leagues are almost like the chances of hitting the lottery. They aren't in your favor. There's a ton of guys, and there's a ton of guys that are really good. at high school level, at the college level, and the minor league level. You know, it's a lot of steps to it. So come up with another plan here in case this big league thing doesn't work. And it's, first of all, always education. But you know, I tell them there's different avenues, you know, to get in the Major League Baseball realm, just besides playing. You know, there's coaching, there's scouting, there's front office. But that front office that always comes with a level of education and being able to know more about the game than being able to just to play it.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Gomes. Hopefully we'll get back to you a little later on.
All right.
I'm gonna turn it over to my brother, Mr. Abram.
All right. Thank you so much, Jamie. And thanks a lot for that interview, Mr. Gomes. Last but definitely not least, we have Mr. Brian Baptiste. Thank you for being so patient with us, Mr. Baptiste, as well as everybody else who are still attending. So let's get it started. You were a facilities admin and planned construction. Do you think we need to expand our concept of being sports executives and how to get to higher positions? Compliance we should be examining in terms of compliance more roles. What type of roles do you think that we should be looking into kind of along what you were doing?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me this evening, and all the panelists were exceptional. Yeah, I think for me, it was really about how do you diversify your portfolio and give yourself experiences where when you want to be able to sit into the athletic director chair, you're able to check a lot of those boxes because you've had those experiences. I think, you know, I started my career out in compliance, athletic compliance specifically, and it really allowed me to be able to learn a lot about the different areas within the NCAA landscape. I mean, because you're directly dealing with all sorts of issues, whether it's coaches, whether it's student athletes, whether it's the marketing department, whether it's donors. And then the opportunity came about to be able to oversee a construction project and multiple construction projects. And when you think about, you know, that transition, it was really thinking, oh, how do you make sure you don't get pigeonholed as the compliance person, right? And often that happens to a lot of us in college athletics. You get pigeonholed and you're the compliance person, you're the academic support person, right? You don't get the opportunity to be able to get a lot of other experiences. And the facility piece was great because now you think about, well, you're working with local and state and federal government, you know, as it relates to permitting, right? You're doing some revenue generating opportunities when you're thinking about how do you design these facilities where you can bring in more revenue from an institutional perspective. You think about the interaction that you have with donors, right? Because the opportunity to be able to provide and generate additional resources for your institution to support student athletes. And so for me, it was about being able to have all of those opportunities that were different. So when I had the ability to get in front of a search firm and to get in front of a president and to have questions about how do you make sure that you're providing a full experience for student athletes and being able to create an environment and a culture for an athletic department to allow those student athletes to have success, you have the opportunity to really go back and say, here are experiences that I could directly speak to that are diverse. And I think if we have the opportunity to look at different things, and I don't have an architectural background, I didn't have a construction background, but it was the ability to do something different and expand, my base and reach and challenge myself a little bit. And if we're okay to challenge ourselves, right, and if we're okay to realize that we can't pigeonhole ourselves into a box, which people like to do, then it will provide us other opportunities. And so I always encourage, individuals that whether it's, they're in compliance now and they want to be able to figure out, well, how do I get out of compliance and do something different, right? Look at other opportunities. And then if you have the ability to engage in various aspects in a department to say, well, on a Saturday, maybe I should do some marketing in a football game, because I could speak to that, even if I am a academic support personnel, or maybe I should find opportunities to help in the community, so I can say that I'm engaged in with that constituent groups as well too. So any opportunity you have to sort of diversify yourself, I just think it makes you more marketable. And when you're trying to get in front of those decision makers, and from a college athletic standpoint, if you want to be an athletic director, it's a president, right? And you have to be able to speak to all of those experiences to allow them to show that you have the opportunity and the ability to make those decisions and really lead a department.
Okay, thank you for that. You are part of what's called the Atlantic 10 Commission on Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Could you please give us a snippet about what that organization is about? And can you give us a take on how they are effectively addressing the issues we're talking about today in regards to the Rooney Rule?
Yeah, so it's a newly created commission within our conference. I'm really pleased to be able to co-chair that commission along with the president of Duquesne. And it's really an opportunity to leverage the 14 member institutions that we have within the A10. When you think about our communities and where we serve, so whether that's from Massachusetts to Virginia to St. Louis to Dayton, Ohio, right? And we have subject matter experts within our campus community. And it's really about not just looking at athletics, but using athletics as an opportunity to really speak to some of these issues, right? We know that from a professional athletic standpoint that we have athletes that really want to use their voice, but the same thing is happening on a college campus, right? And you think about, these are really important years for young people, whether they're 18 to 23, they're trying to find themselves. And so if we can put together programming that would allow not just student athletes, but any student on the campus. So maybe they decide that they want to be a community organizer. Maybe they decide that they want to go to law school and they want to be a lawyer, or they want to ascend to be a judge and really help effectuate some of the change. Or maybe they want to get into the political realm as well too. So we're trying to be able to do all those things and create opportunities to really, bring about change. So we looked at education and training. And so how do we put together programming to at least have things on our college campuses, right, to be able to talk about some of those issues and educate folks, right? We're thinking about how do we look at policies and procedures when you talk about hiring, right? And you look at, the West Coast Conference, they created the Bill Russell Rule, right? Similar to the Rooney Rule on the collegiate side. So is there an opportunity for us to do something similar within the A10? I think it's important to assess some of the things that were happening on our campus. So let's say we have 10 out of our 14 schools are doing a particular piece of programming. Well, can we do that collectively with all 14 institutions and really leverage the strength of our membership? And so we're looking at all those pieces, and we're just in the infancy. We created it this year, obviously with a lot of the social unrest and civil unrest and social injustices that were happening this summer. But I think it's a tremendous opportunity for us to continue to grow and do something meaningful, but also do it from a unified front and make sure it's also sustainable as well too, because we're seeing it, within our population that we deal with every day. Like they're active and they're engaged and they want to really make a difference. So I'm excited about the possibilities, and I'm just humbled to be able to be part of the commission. And the other thing that we did that was really important when we put together the group. Each institution has 3 members. And so, one member is an administrator. So that could be a president, it could be an athletic director, it could be a coach. We also wanted to make sure that one of the individuals was a current or a former student athlete, so we can hear their perspective, because that's really important. And then we also thought that it was critical to have a subject matter expert. So it could be a diversity officer on your campus, or it could be somebody that's in your alumni base that really, they're working on those issues right now in their field. So, we just really thought it was important to have a real diverse perspective to be able to bring about some meaningful change.
Oh, fantastic. So we know that this type of group is not the first. We've been trying to address issues of race and gender for a while now. We have issues such as the students who are boycotting it in Mizzou in order to get their president removed because of some things that were happening with racism on campus. We had the recent firing of the University of Minnesota football coach due to some things that his students were doing and that he was putting a blind eye to. We've had things like that happening across the country. We had D1 basketball students who are now going to HBCUs because of some of the racism and things like that they're experiencing on the campus. How would you suggest other affinity groups like the Atlantic 10 and Black 80 Alliance go from being figurehead organizations to impactful groups?
Yeah, so I think we sort of use this phrase, it's going beyond the words and into action, right? And so like that's really important to actually do things that are going to bring about change, within the community. I think we're seeing that our student athletes realize like that they're empowered, right? And they want to be able to make an impact, and they're doing and they're realizing that not only from the time that they arrive on our campus, but before they arrive on our campus, because we're now seeing a trend of high profile prospective student athletes that are deciding to go to HBCUs, right? Because they feel like they want to be able to make a difference, and they have the same opportunity and support that they can get at a predominantly white institution as well too. So I think, it's about that piece, right? But it's also about creating strategic alliances that we can actually bring about, some of those impactful moments. When we think about the Black AD Alliance, the things that we talk about, and we have various task forces. So whether it's a pipeline, how do you create a pipeline, right? How do you, if you're a student athlete and you never, thought about being an athletic director, well, now you could look at the Black AD Alliance and see 50 plus other athletic directors on the Division I level that have done it, right? So now you see that as a possibility for you. And so how do we create that pipeline for them to be able to get into those various areas and give them an opportunity, for growth and development, right? We think about alliances. How do we have those strategic alliances within college athletics? So whether that are presidents that want to support what we are doing, whether there are other athletic directors that don't necessarily look like us, that when there are opportunities, whether it's a deputy AD or associate AD, that they do give opportunities for people of color to be able to have those roles, because I could pick up the phone and call someone and say, you should take a really strong look at this individual because they're qualified. And let me speak to, to their characteristics and their attributes and the reason why they would provide, great value to your department. So I think those pieces are really important. How do we work with other organizations, whether it's MOA or whether it's with the NCAA, to create programming that can really help individuals develop? Like I'm a product of a lot of NCAA programming, specifically for minority professionals, right? That have allowed me to be able to do some, communication media training, right? Or to be in front of search firms to do mock interviews. And so how do we create those opportunities in an intentional way to allow for the next generation, right, to continue to see the numbers change? Because when you look at, we're in 2020 right now, in 1985, right? Like the numbers aren't that drastically different from a percentage standpoint. So we have to find ways to utilize this moment where we have some leverage, right? Where people are thinking about it, to continue to push it forward. And that's what we're trying to do, with the Black AD Alliance. And that's what we're also trying to do with the Atlantic 10 Commission. And you can see around college athletics, whether it's the ACC or the Big Ten, there are a bunch of other, organizations that are trying to make sure that diversity and inclusion and equity are at the forefront of their decision making, and it's not just words, right? It's actually actions that they're going about to bring about change.
Okay, and the final question I have for you, Brian, and this is a big one, so it got to be the last one. So talking about student empowerment, that caught me, that terminology. College athletes are not paid. However, recent laws are now considering or allowing college players to have some control of their images and likeness, and essentially their branding. What effect, if any, would this assist in improving diversity in the C-suite and assist in player increasing young athletes' views towards executive rules after their playing time is over?
So I think, Traci touched on this right earlier when she talked about some of her clients and when they think about diversifying their revenue stream, right? Well, I think part of the reason why they may not necessarily be thinking about it because they didn't have the opportunity when they were college athletes. And so being able to create those opportunities now for them to think about, they could be like every other student, right? I mean, the reality is a student athlete doesn't have the ability to start a business and use their name, image, and likeness based on the current rules, but another student on campus does have the ability to do that. And so I think that there are opportunities for, maybe you don't have that entrepreneurial spirit where you want to create a business, right? Or you want to run your own camp, but maybe you're thinking about you're a marketing student, right? You're a marketing student and you're also a student athlete. Well, maybe you want to help your peer help, with their brand, right? And so now you start creating your own opportunities there, right? Or maybe you decide that you want to go into the legal realm, and now it's an opportunity to make sure that the next generation of student athletes are protected and they're not being taken advantage of because they have the opportunity to monetize their name, image, and likeness. You think about revenue generating opportunities, right? Can you do something in your role as a student athlete? Now you're thinking about a different lens, right? You're thinking about another opportunity that wasn't necessarily there because the rules sort of pigeonholed you and didn't give you the opportunity to sort of really flourish and provide, and to provide the options to be able to do some of those things that a normal student can do. So I think when you look at all of the byproduct of the name, image, and likeness, like legislation, it will provide other opportunities that weren't necessarily there for a huge population of influencers, right? Whether it's social media, they're gonna need brand managers, they're gonna need agents, they're going to need individuals that are helping them make sure that no one takes advantage of them, right? And so I think that's just another opportunity where that cohort of individuals is now greater. It isn't isolated to just when they become professional athletes, right? Now they'll need that expertise when they're student athletes and they're on their campus right now.
Thank you so very much, Brian. That was a real deep perspective. I used to be a compliance officer at the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh. So I see a lot of what you're talking about in your speech. So that concludes our panelists individually, that is. And so now we have a Q&A session. All right. Kelly, are you taking over, or Jamie?
No, I'm not taking over, but may I suggest that we go into our breakout rooms, and then let's go to Dan to introduce the breakout rooms, and we can kind of put the questions with the people. I think that match some of the questions with the panelists.
Okay, well, this was a wonderful panel, and I'd like to thank all the panelists for spending your personal time with us. When I called each of you individually, I know you thought I was crazy. First, some of you didn't know me, and those of you who did said, well, he's at it again. But thank you for joining us for the ride. Also, we'd like to thank our corporate sponsor, Thomas Reuters, for helping us with this program. And I want to give a little commercial plug while we're setting up the breakout rooms, because I understand we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. January 21st, 2021, our next diversity series is going to happen, is Pathways to Equal Justice. And this is going to be another dynamic program where we're going to have 3 individuals talk about their path of reforming of the criminal justice system. So you don't want to miss that one. And it's going to be very good, very exciting, and very informative. And it starts 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 Central. For the breakout rooms, what we're doing is we're going to have Traci remaining in the big room. Brian and Wayne are going to be put into a room of their own, and Demeka is going to be in a room of her own. And what the concept is, so that we'll be able to get up close and personal with them and be able to ask some additional questions. And I'm waiting on some guidelines from our technical people as to if we're ready to go with that at this point in time. And if we're not ready, they're going to play a little music. Up there we go. They're giving us directions so we can join the breakout room. So you click join when prompted and look for your icons and go to the breakout rooms. You should see the little 4 dots and be able to go right into the breakout rooms. So let's see everybody in breakout rooms for the next 10 to 15 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and have a final closeout. So I think we should be ready to hit the breakout rooms at this point.
So the breakout rooms have launched. If you do not see one, I can assign one to you. Otherwise, if you see that icon that's on the screen, that's what you should be looking for. And
I think we're all stuck, Kim.
you're all stuck. Do you see the
Yeah.
screen or no?
Yeah, we see the screen, but we don't see the break. Okay. Let's see if it comes up. Okay. No, we're not
Brian
seeing it.
Baptiste joined the room. So we
Yeah.
got one person in one.
I think Wayne and myself and Traci and Aaron and Demeka and Jamie were all stuck.
Kim, this is Jeff. I tried to do it and in the link didn't work. It didn't move me to a breakout room.
Okay.
This is Marianne. I couldn't move either. I pushed a button and it didn't move me.
This is Chisa, neither could I.
Welcome to my world.
Just keep everybody here and we just go ahead and hit the questions and start chatting and having a reception and everything else.
Well, first, you can't have a reception without refilling your drink.
There you go.
Right.
Again, this is
go.
apple cider. I just feel the need to say that, especially because we're recording and I'm driving home and I have a reputation as well. So, Traci, while they're all trying to figure it out, I'd love to ask you a question. I love the fact that you gave a standard to those who are seeking mentorship. You know, you come with excellence, because I know so many times you're like, you come fresh, you haven't researched anything. You're just like, I just want you to be my mentor, and you're like, give me something to work with. Can you kind of explain what you're looking for, because people might actually reach out to you? And we would like to know, what are you looking for, you know?
Well, thank you for that. So Kelly, just this morning, for instance, I have a mentor, I have a mentee rather, that's here in Minnesota. He is going to be heading to the East Coast. He no longer wants to be in Minnesota, newsflash. He was a great 1L, had a great position at a big law firm, very smart guy. And he decided he wants to go to DC, Philly, or New York because his family's in Maryland. So I called upon my Morehouse brethren who wanted to meet African-American men in law. What do? I hit up my folks and I said, hey, before you know, I mean, it was like, if I'm introducing you to A. Scott, if I'm introducing you to Tony Pinder, if I'm introducing you to various major partners at major law firms in DC, or Mark Lee in Philly at Blank Run, or whoever I introduced him to, they need to have their stuff together. And so he did. He blew it out of the water. He was ready. His resume was tight, but I had him send me the resume first. I said, maybe you shouldn't say this like this. He was great. I said, what are you going to say? Send it to me. And he, you know, so he was prepped beyond prepped. So it made my job easier. He's got follow-up calls with all of them. And that's how he does that, because again, it makes our job harder because we want to mentor and we want to sponsor. We want to be in the room when there's potential implicit bias. When someone's saying something, I can't help you if I'm not in the room. So it's a blessing to have us in the positions to be in the room. But I want to be able to back it up with something that makes sense to me. Because if I've now heard that there's 45 typos in the brief, it's like, not 45, 2, 4, 5, because again, they're going to focus on our 5 typos because there's only one of us in the room, opposed to a room of 45 majority law students, 2Ls, 3Ls, new lawyers, but they're going to focus on our one. So that's what I mean by help me by making my job as a mentor or sponsor easier, if that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. Jamie, you have some questions?
Yeah, just one, and either Traci or Brian can answer this. What we kind of assumed was, you know, does diversity really matter? All right, not everybody necessarily agrees with diversity. So can you talk about an example? And I think you kind of hit upon it a little earlier, but let's lay that out a little more. Does diversity matter? And can you give us an example of why it matters in your experience?
Did you want to go ahead, Brian?
Sure, I'll go. I mean, I just think it's important, right? I think it's really important for, just the dynamics of an organization and from a cultural standpoint and from a value standpoint to have diversity, of experiences, to have diversity of opinions, right? Because what happens is if you don't, then you end up defaulting to what, everyone else that potentially looks like you or maybe doesn't look like you. So you end up miss the boat in a major way. So like, that's why I think it's important to, but you have to work at it, right? So even from a hiring standpoint, if you think that you're going to be able to have a diverse candidate pool just by posting something online, you're probably not going to get a diverse candidate pool. So you have to actively recruit, right? And so that's important. If you think that you're going to have a diverse hire when you just have one diverse candidate, which is probably some of the reason why there's some issues with the Rooney Rule, you revert to people that look like you, right? And so if it's just 1 out of 4, the research and the data shows that those individuals aren't going to get hired, right? And so I just think like that's, it's really important and to have a seat at the table too, right? When Traci just talked about it, like those are areas of influence and like that's why it's important because now you're also creating that pipeline as well too. So I just think it's so critically important in everything that we do. Diversity, inclusion, like all of those pieces are essential for us to be able to move forward as a society.
Thank you. He's on mute, but I do want to remind everybody that this is a reception. So occasionally take a sip and you are open, you're able to ask questions.
Yep, go ahead.
So please ask questions if you'd like, if you want to raise your hand so that we're not yellow boxing everywhere. But I do have a question from the chat, but if you want to say something, please, by all means, engage.
Hey, this is
I had a
Bernie.
question.
This is Bernie Seiler. If you guys can hear me, my picture's not up there. This question is for Wayne and maybe Demeka, and it has to do with the fact that much of our discussion revolves around the fact that these sports, football and basketball particularly, are largely represented by African-American players. However, I have noticed that Major League Baseball over the years has been fairly devoid of African-American players. I grew up in an era where there was a large number of superstars who were African-American. Woody Mays, Hank Aaron, Willie Stargell. But now there seems to be somewhat of a shortage. There are a lot of Hispanic African players, but a very small percentage, relatively speaking, of American-born Black baseball players. Does anybody think that has anything to do with the impact of the front office in baseball versus other sports?
Well, I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. I'll throw some numbers out at you. 6% of the players are African Americans. There's 3 teams right now without any Black players in the team. The World Series had 1 player in the World Series.
Right.
That hurts the promotion of African Americans if you watch it and hey man, and you're thinking, hey, we don't play. Now, the best player on the field, there was 1 player in the World Series that was Black, and he's the best player. It's Mookie Betts.
Mookie Betts.
Highest paid, and he's the best player. So that tells you a little bit about when we go out there and perform and give the opportunity and play and put something into it, the results we would get. The answer to getting more Black players in the game it starts at the youth ages. The sport is expensive. It's dominated by travel ball. It's not as, it doesn't promote the excitement that most young Black men look for. I'm trying how I can explain that. In football, you can celebrate. In basketball, you can celebrate. And in baseball, that's kind of frowned upon. You know, the game's changing a little bit, but you know, it's kind of like golf. You know, if you celebrate too much, you're a showboat. Well, that's not the point in football, and that's not the point in basketball. But it's changing. It's changing. That old way of thinking is kind of moving out, and there was more bet flips in the playoffs than I've ever seen in my life, and I actually kind of enjoy it. It brings that.
You kind of answered my question. In other words, baseball still has that conservative.
It does. It does. I'm sorry. It does.
To it, so to speak.
Especially compared to basketball and football. Yes, it does. It does. It does.
Yeah. I mean, young kids today just don't. When I was growing up, baseball was something that we all did, and we just, you know, I see young guys today. They love basketball, they love football, and I hear a lot of young guys saying they don't even like baseball. So, you know, now what can be done about that, I don't know, but I do think that has some impact on other levels of, you know, the front office, because if you don't have the participation,
right,
and attention.
Yeah. You know, I don't think, you know, his name slipped me. The gentleman that's the VP of the Golden State Warriors. Now, in basketball, the players have a lot more influence on who the manager is than baseball, and I think that's more because of the sport. And baseball is a lot less strategic than in styles. We don't have that in baseball. You go out there and play. In basketball, you have a triangle, and you have different defenses, and you run up and down the court. And in football, you have more of a strategy. And baseball is kind of just go out there and play. So I think the players want a system. Well, in baseball, there isn't a system. In basketball, you know, the players have more of a voice on what kind of system they want to be in. So that's not the case in baseball. So the players don't really influence who the manager is. A manager in baseball, the quality is they look for is more of a leadership quality. Who can lead rich men? I mean, players who are making a ton of money, you know, and how do you have one rule for 25 different guys that are totally different levels? So talent
Thanks, Wayne. Let me
can I interrupt, Mr. Bernie? Sorry. Can I interrupt for just a second? He's breaking up, but we have our rooms now. If you guys want to go to the breakout rooms, that way more, because I see there are a lot of baseball questions coming in, and we can just, if you're open to it, Wayne, you can talk to those people. We have other questions for other sports, but the breakout rooms are open now. If you want to
take me into a room, I don't have that feature in my.
Could you take him to a room, please, Ken?
Oh, there we go. Okay, I got it, man. I have a Commodore 64 computer.
It's all right. Okay, I see people leaving us. And I guess, Dan had already spoken to this. Click the join button when prompted. You'll see the 4 buttons for breakout rooms. Miss Traci will be staying here with Jamie and myself.
Okay, this is Jeff Allen again. I'm trying, it's not working.
Where would you like to go, Jeff?
Oh, I don't care.
Okay, we've got, you want to talk to football? You want to talk baseball? You want to stay here with Traci?
I'm actually happy talking to any one of them because the question that I have applies to all of them.
Okay, well, shoot, take your shot.
The question that I have is that we now are, or before COVID anyway, we were in the midst of a movement toward allowing schools to pay their athletes and allowing athletes to capitalize on their own name and their own fame while they're students. What difference, if any, do you think that makes with respect to the diversity question and increasing diversity in participation?
I'll take that. I was just going to say, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but.
I came in late, so if you did before.
Oh, no. What it's going to do is it's going to start leveling the playing field if that goes through. I mean, so here, think about it. If you go to college and you're not an athlete and you happen to start your own marketing program, right? And you start making money, then you're just a kid that goes to school that's a smart entrepreneur that started in college. And we hear about it later on and we're like, wow, he was smart. Okay, but if you're an athlete, you have a collar on you, right? The NCAA says you can't. And so it's very interesting what we're going to do with this piece, but name, image, and likeness is the only place that you're not going to be able to commercially exploit the student. And so they're still going to get you a shot. Literally just yesterday, a Twitter company came to a client of mine, and these are like Midwestern guys that are like the best in the Midwest. And so they're trying to, I won't mention the company, they're gonna swoop in, you know, we're gonna look at a contract, and then they're gonna all of a sudden do a documentary on them and then out the door. And it's like, these kids are high school students. And so we're trying to figure out the right line, because again, it's not them doing it, it's someone doing it for them. But the whole game is so that everyone knows that we want to make money as soon as we can. That's kind of the way it is. And we don't want to violate any rules. I mean, if we want to just do a big picture, the players want to make money, their families want to make money. Some kids want to finish school. Others are like, I want to finish school and make money. So again, that's what we're trying to do. And we just can't violate the NCAA rules regarding.
Yeah, everybody understands you can't violate the NCAA rules. Actually, one of the interesting things may be that we have kids staying into college more than just their freshman year when they're athletes, because they can now make a reasonable amount of money while they're still in school.
That's right. And they may want to not
graduate. Have a negative impact on diversity participation in some of the professional sports, because these kids stay in school.
I don't want to dominate the conversation. I'm sure other people might have other thoughts as well.
You're our expert.
I mean, the bottom line is that if they have a shot at being a top player and getting to the big show, they don't want to risk it. So we have many of our diverse students, Black students, Hispanic students, whatever, just playing their position, quote unquote, and being safe, playing it safe. But if we open up the name, image, and likeness piece, where we can now let the college student get into marketing their name, image, and likeness only, it's going to be a wonderful revenue source for our diverse candidates, because a lot of them are without funds. They don't come from much, some of us, frankly. And so it's good. It helps put money on the table for families that have been waiting and that want to wait, that may even want their student, their scholar to graduate. But if it's graduate versus going to the pros, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the pros. So you're right. I think to your point, some of them may stay in school a little bit longer, but if there's even the inkling that there's an opportunity for them to go to the pros, they're out, marketing or not, and name, image, and likeness, not so much. I don't think it has that much of an impact, but I think it does help those that are in school and to put some extra money in their pocket if they do it the right way.
Thank you.
So Traci, does that mean they can't even do things like, you know, a lot of these college kids have followers, and I know like on YouTube and everything, you get paid for certain, you almost become like a little influencer where you get paid per click and things. They can't even engage in things like that where they can make money off of just people following them?
Correct. And that's all, that's the $200,000 question these days, because everything is social media, right? But we can't do it, because if you can do it at that level, then you've violated. So absolutely. No. But name, image, and likeness is different. So name, image, and likeness means if I'm coming to you simply because you're that popular, and it's, you know, now I've made 50 t-shirts off of the best high school student or the best college student, and that's all I've done, then that's the fine line. And there's case law surrounding that right now. It's a great area to look into. But a lot of our parents are saying, it's okay, you know, let my scholar do that. He's smart, he's a marketing major, and he's also an athlete. Why shouldn't he be able to make this money? But then you've got the NCAA that is your pipeline into the pros. And so it's the double-edged sword. 'edged 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 sw
Hey, Kelly, Tish had a question. I lost it, but can you ask that to that question?
Yeah, I saw it. Let me see. These glasses are actually not reading glasses. They're screen glasses. So I'm like, let me take my glasses off so I can see. Okay. She says, first of all, wonderful program. Thank you for all this, the panels. My question is, are there broader discussions shifting from diversity to equality, inclusion? After getting in the door, what then?
After getting in which door? So for instance, after getting in to the professional world, what then? Or
She didn't go in and that was it. Is Tish on with us?
I think she's in the room.
Yeah, she's in the room. Tish, can you elaborate on that question? She's on mute.
I think she's saying, like, if you get hired, what's there to help you to bring you in? I think David Kelly might have talked about it in terms of making sure they get business. Like if you're in, if you get past that interview and you get hired, how do you keep propelling through the profession, whichever profession it may be?
You mean if you get, for instance, if you happen to become an assistant general manager at a major, at a basketball team, professional basketball team, how do you stay in the game so that you can matriculate up to potentially being the head coach or
I
something?
think that's what I think she's saying. Tish, correct me if you can speak up, but I think that's what she's getting at.
Well, it's very difficult. Again, I can give you a case in point. All I can do is give stories, and stories are sometimes helpful. A wonderful gentleman, the team will remain nameless, was an African-American assistant general manager, and he was great. People loved him, super smart, articulate. The players loved him. He could relate to the players. Again, this is a basketball assistant general manager. When the guard changed and there was a new head coach that was brought up by the owner to try to see if they could, sometimes when there's a trade, there's a whole sweep. So you have like 5 to 7 players going in various directions. And he was the one helping them figure out all these trades, right? Because he was great, because he knew everybody and he was kind of talking to the families and saying, hey, so-and-so is going to have to go. And the minute all those trades happened, the chief people officer called him in the office and said, hey, here's your pink slip. And he was blown completely away. And he was just like, what? And I was just like, what? And everybody and the players and people. So again, if the owner of that basketball team had said, hey, you can't get rid of blah, blah, blah. Are you kidding me? That's our guy. It would have been a different story, but it wasn't. So again, I truly don't believe that there's much that you can do power-wise, unless it's your relationship. Again, we talked about relationships at the top, and I've seen it happen, and I've seen people devastated. The director of player operations for a major NBA team, everyone loved her. She was a former WNBA player. She had played overseas. She was great, beautiful, tall, normal, all the guys, but she was smart. She was cool. She would tell them, don't buy 5 cars, don't have 17 watches, watch your back when you're out driving. All the things you want your director of players to do. Loved her. When they did the sweep and when there was a new general head coach, she went out too, and she was devastated. Didn't even see it coming, just smacked upside the head. Again, these are 2 African-American front office. One had 7 years in, the other had like 3 years in. I mean, and one is just like, I don't know, I can't even get a call back from her. We were close. It was like, are you okay? Like wellness and COVID and all this, like some of these things are hitting folks very hard in this industry. So I have some some horror stories, frankly, because I don't see enough people in ownership that can catch some of our minority front order, I don't like the word, diverse, African-American, whatever you want to call us, whatever tag you want to put on us, it's not the majority. And they are the ones that are falling by the wayside.
I met a young man a couple of days ago at a farmer's market. He was 6'10". My 8-year-old was like that. I'm going to be 7'10", just like him. But he's just dramatic. And I talked to him and I said, what are you doing with your life? He's 20 years old. All he can think is basketball. He told me where he's playing and everything. I invited him to this event. Crickets. What can we do because we might not be in your field, but we want to help however we can as lawyers and the guidance part. What can we do? I'm like, I can't believe he's not here. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's good that you invited him. What I wanted to say is also just all of us on the call, we must have some interest, whether we're family members, whether we have kids that want to be athletes, whether we were athletes one day and it didn't happen for us, whether we represent athletes. I guess what I think I should leave this panel with is that it's a family affair. It truly is. I mean, we have to make sure that we're watching each other's backs, whether it's the lawyer that's representing the player. You're representing the family. You really are, because I can't tell you how many times I've had to, as a general counsel to athletes, assist the family as well. So diversity does matter. And a lot of our majority attorneys, I think someone else spoke to it, after the agent gets their 3%, right? And they might have a roster. They might be at the biggest agency in the world. We can name some. They've got 3 letters. And they've got maybe 5 to 25 different players, probably 25. After they get their percentage, whatever it is, typically, if it's the NFL, it's 3%, if it's, whatever, then they're on to the next potential draftee. Sometimes it's incumbent upon the lawyers, because we're lawyers on the call. Thank you, ABA, for the lawyers to fill in that gap, because there are going to be other needs besides getting drafted, right? They're going to have estate planning needs. They really will, because there may be a career-ending injury, or they might need a power of attorney, or they may need a healthcare directive. I mean, I've had clients, you get called I've been in the hospital, like with my clients and their family, and we're all just sitting there hoping to see how they're going to come out the room. And no one's ever thought about an estate plan, because they can't go out and do what they were going to do, and who's going to handle the finances? So, I mean, that's something that a lawyer can help do. There are nonprofit issues, right? Some of us want to get really philanthropic. We want to have a foundation. As soon as we get some money and we're in the big leagues, and that's fine. We all want to love a charity and a foundation and a cause. I have a client that's very close to his charity because his brother had a heart issue, right? So that was his cause. But what he did was he tracked those organizations for a while and just gave his money to those organizations. He didn't all of a sudden say he had to now run a foundation because of because there are also back office issues. You need to know that every year you've got to file a 990. Every year you've got to be compliant, or you'll lose your status within 3 years. You have to, make sure your team is tight. Make sure your board of directors for your foundation is. If you're going to run a camp, there's a lot of things that happen with that. How much do you pay those that run your camp? Because those are all of the expenditures that you've got to list on your 990. All of these things are the toolkit that we as lawyers need to wrap around our athletes, okay? It could be criminal defense. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying. I've got a call, somebody went through the airport. He's from down south. He carries a gun, but he didn't realize it when he went through the detector. So then I'm like, at whatever time in the morning, it's like, okay, I can't be there, but I have my folks in New York. We're gonna figure it out.
That's where I would come in.
They're stuck at LaGuardia. So again, there are many different facets of what you need to do to wrap yourself around your athletes. And I believe that we, as diverse lawyers, people of color, because many of our athletes are, and then those that aren't of color, just care for them enough that it's not just a number and it's not just your percentage, because there are going to be more needs. And the uncle might want to slip you some moonshine. And I'm like, no, I'm good, because you're down south with the family sitting at the table eating peach pie, whatever it takes. You just have to just be the professional, sit in whatever circumstance you're given, and handle the client, because it's not just the client. It's typically a family affair. So that's what I would like to leave the panel with.
Thank you
so much, Traci.
It sounds like counsel, you know, it's true counsel in so many different facets. It's really almost the old time way, if you will, of what lawyers used to do, quite frankly.
Yes, Sister Sheila. Yes, and you know that.
That's a powerhouse. We have the Sheila Boston in the house. How are you? We want to recognize you and say congratulations, Jamie. We're actually closing in a minute and everybody will be coming in here. But Jamie, can we get some accolades real quick while we have, you know, Miss Sheila Boston here?
Well, to be clear, this is my sister, not my wife. And very proud. She is currently the president of New York City Bar, is the first woman of color to hold that position ever. And so very proud of her and many other accomplishments she has. But she spent time with us tonight and I really appreciate it. And it's good to see you.
But just so the record is clear, I'm proud of this young man right here, and he did his thing today. And I'm just so happy that this program was awesome. It really was. I so much enjoyed it. Traci, you know I love you. Oh, we're closing now, but peace and blessings to everybody.
Thank you for being with us.
And just want to thank everybody for spending the evening, afternoon with us. This has been a wonderful event. A couple housekeeping announcements. Again, we want to thank our sponsor, Thomson Reuters, for our sponsorship. Also, our next program, January 21st, Pathways to Equal Justice. Same time, it's a reform of the criminal justice system. And also, I was reminded that at our mid-year, Thomson Reuters is also sponsoring the WIN program where Deborah Roberts will be one of our speakers. So that information will be going out as well. So on behalf of the Activate Diversity team, just want to thank everybody for coming out and have a great evening. And to our great moderators, Aaron and Jamie, excellent job. Thank you so much. And to Kelly, the person who guided this ship, very well done. And to Alfreda Coward, thank you for giving us the opportunity to show you that we could get it done. So everybody have a great night, and we'll see you at the next event.
And
January
Dan, sorry,
21st.
Interrupt you
Go
as
ahead.
the committee chair for this as well. Kudos to you and to everybody. Great job, everybody.
Thank you. And don't forget, we still aren't finished for our summit for this week. We still have programs tomorrow as well. So good night, everybody. Be safe and stay healthy. And we will catch you at the next event.